In the past half hour, news about a missile attack by Iran on Israel has been denied by an armed forces general in Tehran through state television.
Israeli military had earlier said it had detected launches from Iran, to which the Israeli Defence Minister Israel Katz said Israel would be responding forcefully.
Well, this all comes hours after a ceasefire between the two countries took effect. American President Donald Trump took to social media overnight to state the ceasefire is now in effect. Please do not violate it. Before signing off, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States.
President Trump's ceasefire announcement coming just a few hours after Iran launched missiles at a US airbase in Qatar. That was in response to American strikes on its nuclear sites at the weekend. There was a statement from Iran. It said that 6 missiles were launched. That's the same number as used in the American attack on its nuclear site in Fordo, you'll remember.
Well, the comments from all three nations follow 4 waves of Iranian missile strikes against territory. But Israel's defense forces say 6 rounds of strikes hit the country in a 2-hour time span. These are the live pictures from Beersheba, just south of Tel Aviv, where we are. It's one of the areas that was hit. Rescue workers say 4 people have been killed there. People across Israel were woken early to the sounds of missile alerts on their phones. We had 4 successive alerts on our phones, warning us and warning millions of Israelis to head to shelters. I'm going to show you now the moment of a missile strike hitting that southern town of Beersheba, a warning that you may find it distressing. The emergency services say among those who died were a woman and a man in their 40s and a man in his 20s. They were all in their safe room at the time that the missile hit. Reports from Iran, quoting a regional governor in the province of Gilan, say that 9 people were killed early on Tuesday in Israeli strikes there. Live now to our correspondent, Dan Johnson, who is in Jerusalem. Dan, just bring us right up to date, first of all, with that Beersheba attack and also with the allegations of Iranian missiles into Israel, into northern Israel this morning.
Yeah, let's try and talk you through the timeline here. Israelis were woken up by air raid sirens sounding at 5 a.m. this morning, told to take shelter because of that successive waves of different Iranian missile attacks, 6 of them in total that hit different parts of the country. Most of the missiles intercepted by the air defence, but some of them able to get through, and at least 1 direct hit in Beersheba in the south of Israel. That is where 4 Israelis were killed. There are more than 20 people injured in that part of the country, and emergency teams had to conduct a big operation there, going through the rubble, trying to reach those casualties. So that was all happening very early this morning, just as Israelis were reading the news that a ceasefire had been proposed and apparently agreed. There was no confirmation of that by the Israelis for quite a few hours, but at 7 a.m. local time, after that wave of Iranian strikes, the skies went quiet and it did seem like things were calming down. Then after that, we got the confirmation from the Israelis that they had agreed the terms of this plan. There was a question about exactly when it would come into force, but the Israelis said they were willing to sign up to it, having achieved their aims in terms of eradicating the threat of Iran's nuclear program and the ballistic missiles that have been fired repeatedly towards this country over the course of this conflict over the last 12 days. But then, just about an hour after that, the air raid sirens went off again in the north of Israel around Haifa, and that is when this single Iranian missile was fired, the Israelis say, after the ceasefire and in breach of it. Now, the Iranians are denying that. So what's gone on here? Is there some sort of misstep, some miscalculation, some rogue launch that the Iranian command hadn't actually ordered? It's unclear. The Iranians denying it, but the Israelis are taking it as a deliberate violation of the ceasefire. The Defence Minister has promised that there will be significant strikes in retaliation. So now the hopes of peace, the hope of that ceasefire deal taking effect, all depends on exactly what the Israelis do, what the scale and extent of those retaliation strikes are, if indeed they come.
Dan, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Yes, the Israeli Defence Minister said that we will forcefully respond to what he calls Iran's ceasefire violation. The far-right Finance Minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has said Tehran will shake. Let's bring in my colleague Wira Davis, who joins us from Beersheba, the scene of that deadly attack this morning. Wira, just bring us right up to date with the scene there.
Yeah, well, this is, as you say, Beersheba. It's a city of about 200,000 people, so a big city in the south, just in the Negev desert. But it has been struck several times over the last couple of weeks, and this was the scene of the latest strike at about 5:45 local time this morning. If I just step back, and Alon, the cameraman, is going to show you the continuing rescue work going on behind me. There's a ladder going up to the top of the building there. Now, there were 4 people killed inside that building. I've just been speaking to the head of the Zaka search and rescue teams here. One of their members is on that ladder up there now. And he told me that the 4 people that were killed, at least 3 of them were inside their safe room. So they were observing the missile warning. They were inside their safe room when this building, this residential building, took a direct hit from what appears to be a ballistic missile. It's a massive, massive bomb site. There's been superficial damage in the areas around here. Many shop windows, many house windows have had their glass put out. Buildings around here are all damaged. And there is a search and recovery operation up going on there as we speak. So this happened technically just before the ceasefire came into place. But of course, after the other missile alert, which Dan mentioned, the Israeli Defence Minister said that there would be now powerful strikes against regime targets in Iran. So it's a big question whether this ceasefire is going to hold at the minute. But again, here in Beersheba, the scene is one of pretty complete destruction and devastation in this one particular building, a city that has been hit several times over the last couple of weeks.
And Wira, the Israelis have said that there have been at least 50 direct impacts of Iranian missiles over the last 12 days that have breached Israel's defence shields. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of grief where you are, but have you spoken to anybody there about their appetite for a ceasefire and for this conflict to come to an end? Do they want this promised ceasefire, or do they want Israel to keep going?
Well, look, the Israeli government says it has completely or very much put back and severely damaged Iran's nuclear program. But it also says it has severely damaged Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. This incident alone may put that question, that statement into question. And there are fears in Israel and, of course, in the wider region that if the ceasefire between Israel and Iran doesn't hold, it could grow into something much more, much bigger, not just encompassing the 2 countries, but also, as we saw yesterday, in Qatar and other parts of this region. So there are hopes on both sides and in the wider region that the ceasefire does hold, because clearly both sides do have the capability militarily to damage each other very badly. We know that several hundred people have been killed in Iran over the last 12 days. In Israel now there have been 28 people killed. And if this kind of thing were to continue, then the potential for more deaths on both sides is critically and certainly there. So yes, there is support for a ceasefire. An off-ramp for both countries would allow the Israelis, the Israeli Prime Minister, to claim victory, certainly over Iran's nuclear ambitions. And it would also, from an Iranian perspective, allow the Iranian regime to remain in power. Do you remember now that the Iranian regime is still in power, the supreme leader is still alive, and there are many in Israel, there are some in Israel on the hard right, who would like their government to go further, but perhaps an off-ramp is the best thing for both sides now.
Wira Davis, live with us from Beersheba. Thanks very much indeed. Well, let's go over to the Armenia-Iran border and join our correspondent Andrew Harding, who is there. Andrew, just paint the picture of where you are and what people there are telling you fleeing Iran.
It's a pretty remote region. The green valley you can see behind me with the river marks the border between Iran and Armenia, and the mountains in the background there are Armenian territory. And there's a very small border crossing which has been used, been quite busy in recent days. Iranians starting to trickle out in their dozens, in their hundreds, not a flood certainly, but people who say they are escaping the violence. A lot of them have driven from Tehran and other big cities. This morning we've been speaking to some of them. They're aware, most people, of the ceasefire, but I'd say a mood of some skepticism about whether it will last. One man said to me, "I don't believe anything that Donald Trump says." What we have here is a very small, partial window onto what's going on inside Iran itself, because most of the people leaving, and indeed most of the people willing to speak to us, are Iranians who have foreign passports. So these are people who may be visiting Iran and now leaving in the only way they can find a safe route out. And so they have a particular perspective, most of them critical of the regime. I spoke to one woman this morning who had left the country with her young son. They said they'd been about a kilometre away from a bomb attack in Tehran itself. They were planning to spend maybe a couple of weeks now inside Armenia to see if the ceasefire was going to take hold. I asked her what the mood was inside Iran itself and the attitude towards American and Israeli strikes, and she said, look, from our perspective and the mood of people she knows is that Iranians in general do not want to see democracy change forced on them by outside. They want to take responsibility internally for any changes in government, any reforms that happen.
A reminder that the BBC is not allowed currently by the Iranian government to report from inside Iran. So Andrew has a really important access there in speaking to Iranians who are crossing that border. Andrew, what sort of picture are they painting of life inside Iran in terms of the shortages of fuel and food and the like over the last 12 days?
It's a very big country, of course, remember, and a very mixed picture. Some people we've spoken to say, look, we were on holiday on the Caspian Sea in resort towns there that seem a world away from what's going on in Tehran and other bigger cities. Other people have said, no, prices are going up. There is shortages. There are shortages of electricity. Some people have said, no, the banks are working just fine. The bakeries are working just fine. Everyone, of course, aware that the internet has been down, mostly that communications are a problem.
Andrew Harding on the Armenia-Iran border, thanks very much indeed. We will have plenty more from the region in just a moment or two. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.